Hello and welcome to another week of Good Investing. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Rachel. How are
good
you?
to see you.
Yes.
Yes, doing good. Just burning alive in Texas.
I
It's another day in hell.
went to this, did I already tell you this? I went to this comedian. Her name is Angela Johnson. She came to Texas and she said, I don't know what I was thinking to come to Texas in the summer. She's like, it literally feels like the devil is walking the streets. It is so that hot. It's so hot. But thank you for air conditioning.
Yeah, and I will say, I lived in New York City for a lot of years, and I think it was worse because in New York City, you don't have a garage and you don't have a car.
Oh.
You are exposed to the elements. So even though it's only 100 degrees for like a week in the summer, it's like the worst week ever because you are literally schlepping home from Trader Joe's with like bags of stuff, sweating in the subway. Like the only breeze you feel is like from the subway, like racing by you is like the breeze from the car.
Oh my goodness.
That's like it.
So my cousins came to visit from California where they, you always have perfect weather in California, especially the Bay Area. And they come, and they're surviving because I'm like, literally it's not a big deal because you're going from the car, which has air conditioning, to a store which has a lot of air conditioning. So you're just like getting that little bit from the car to wherever you're going, or you're in the pool and then the pool makes it bearable.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Guys, first world problems. Anyway, enough about us burning alive in Texas. Listen, we have actually a really interesting guest today. Yes. I know we say that every week, but it's actually really cool. I'm really excited about it.
Okay, so for our listeners, we have such a special guest because since you're building your wealth now, we want you to learn how to protect your wealth. Mm-hmm. So we have on Carmen Rosas, and she is a hoop-wearing, award-winning, and stereotype-defying attorney. Carmen Rosas is on a mission to help women chase and secure the bag, drawing on more than 10 years of experience in estate and business succession planning. Rosas equips women to protect themselves and their families by protecting their assets. So welcome to the podcast, Carmen.
Hi, Carmen.
Hi, thank you, Andrea and Rachel, so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to learn from you. We hope that our listeners are well on their way to building their financial future. But as we know, with that comes the need to protect those assets.
Exactly. We want to make sure that everyone has the right things in place, and we want to hear from you what those right things are.
Yes.
So please tell us about you. Tell us about what you do, and let's go
where
from
you
there.
Come from. We also want to know about you and your life, where you come from.
Yeah, so it's funny you talk about California because the weather today or even over this weekend has been really not Californian. It's been like muggy and gloomy, and I was like, this is not July weather. This is not okay. Born and raised in the Bay Area, so we always have good weather, and it hasn't been that way. But yeah, here we are. So I am born and raised in California. I have a daughter, a stepson, and my partner. We live in Redwood City, so still local. And I've been practicing estate planning and business succession planning for a little over 10 years now. I have my own practice, Carmen Rosas Law, and I really love what I do. I really love, helping my clients, serving them, and really just bringing peace of mind because, we are putting our blood, sweat, and tears into getting our first investments, right? And then the idea is that we get our investments to grow and our money makes money for us, right? And so we're putting that effort in, and then we want to make sure that it's all protected. So my job essentially is making sure that those assets and that wealth gets passed on through generations. So whether it's, to your children or grandchildren, all the way down to great grandchildren, it's making sure that passes on, whether it's real estate investments, stock investments or whatever it is, or even a business, right? So if you have a business, especially like an investing business, you want to make sure that that wealth is handed on. And so what we do is we make sure it stays out of court. You limit any estate taxes or, inheritance taxes as much as possible. And so setting up the right plan is always super important. And we sit with our clients to figure that out.
That's awesome. Okay, so can you give us a little bit more details about how a person can ensure that they get protected? What do they need? What do they bring you? Tell us all the deets.
Yeah. So it's, and it's typical lawyer answer. Well, it depends. But I'll give you the kind of most common general things, right? So say you're, um, an adult, right? Maybe you have kids, you have some investment properties, and you want to make sure, your kids get everything, or your spouse gets everything, your partner gets everything. If something happens to you, right? If you're incapacitated or you pass away. So the first step I always tell people, whether or not you have a business or not, is protecting your personal assets. And we do that with an estate plan. So an estate plan comes with things, you've probably heard these words thrown around: a trust, a will, advanced healthcare directive, power of attorney. So all of those documents together serve as a comprehensive estate plan. The most important one, I would say, obviously, are the bare essentials: will, healthcare directive, power of attorney. If you're incapacitated, it basically appoints someone to make decisions for you. A will says who gets all your stuff. But if you're investing and you have larger assets, so for example, if you have more than $188,000 in fair market value of assets, right? So they don't care about liabilities, state doesn't care about any of that. You need a trust. Otherwise, your family's going through a probate process. The process we call is probate, and that's a court process where it takes lots of time, lots of money, because here in California, the money or the cost of it is 5% of the fair market value. And I know that your listeners understand fair market value, right? And what that means. So they're not deducting liabilities from, that percentage or those amounts. Whereas if you set up a trust or a comprehensive plan, you pay a one-time basically setup fee, and it is significantly lower. So for example, here you're looking at probably 5 to 10,000 for like a quote unquote average estate. If you have a couple of properties, if you have more and your investments are larger, obviously there would be more tax and tax planning that needs to get done. So it becomes more complex. But on average, but if you own one property, right? And if I'm in Silicon Valley, one property on your little quote unquote, 2 little bedroom, $1 million home, you're looking at upwards of $50,000 in probate fees, right? So do you want to pay, say we're putting at 10,000 for your $1 million home, or 50,000, right? And then you're also giving up time, peace of mind. And so a comprehensive estate plan, but more specifically a trust, is super, super important to keep that protected. Another thing I like to say is that a trust is like a treasure box. Basically, everything you own goes into this treasure box. You hold the key. You get to decide what comes in, what goes out, who's in charge of it, who you pass the key on to, rather than allowing the state or the court system to decide what happens with your assets.
Right.
So can you dig in a little more on what does that mean for the state to decide what happens to the assets?
Yeah. So within a trust, you get to determine who's in charge, right? So I like to say it's controlling your assets beyond the grave, right? Like, or from the grave. So you can pick a trustee, so someone that you trust to make decisions to continue investing your assets. So an example I like to give, right, is say you go out on date night, you have 2 kids, kids are with the babysitter, you and your husband or you and your partner end up in a car accident, say both of you pass away. If you have a proper estate plan in place, you get to decide who's going to manage your kids' assets so that they can receive it at 21, or that there's something left for them when they get older. It also allows you to say, well, if I'm incapacitated, right, I just can't make decisions. Maybe I'm in a coma after this car accident and I can't, nobody is there to continue paying my mortgage, to pay my property taxes, to pay all of the things that need to keep on running. So when I come out of this coma or I regain capacity, my life isn't in shambles and I haven't lost everything that I've worked so hard for. So you get to pick the right people to put in place. The other part is that you get to decide when your kids will actually receive these assets, right? So they become, trust fund babies, essentially, where you get to decide. The default is at 18, they're legal adults and they could potentially receive all of the assets. So say if you have upwards of $20 million and your 18-year-old is going to walk into a chunk of cash at that amount, who knows what they will do. I joke, do you want them at 21 going to Vegas and putting it all on black, right? In the roulette table? Probably not. And so what you get to do is you get to decide, well, at 21, they get this amount. At 25, they get this amount. Or you can set conditions that say, you know what, they don't get anything extra, they get all of their health, education, and maintenance taken care of. And then when they pass away, and if there's still money, then it goes to my grandkids, and then it just continues going down the line. And that's something what we like to call a dynasty trust. So that's a little bit more complex, and when there's more assets that want to get passed down.
Oh, I love that. You can really create a legacy. I know there's multiple families in America, like the Rockefellers, for example, that really have had this 100-year legacy that they've built. I didn't know about the dynasty trust you said. I didn't know about that. That's amazing. There's a way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that estate planning is kind of morbid. And especially if you're like in your 30s or your 40s, you're like, I don't have to worry about that for another 30 years. Well, life happens, as I'm sure you know, and we can't unfortunately plan when our exit will be. And I think it's honestly selfish to not do something like this, because not only are you going to leave your family and your children grieving, but also trying to sort through the mess, that you've left them if you aren't tying these up into neat little bows and doing it well before you think, you'll actually pass. So I think it's really important that people consider this earlier than later, and start to engage, an estate planner like yourself to kind of like talk about what it would look like if they passed before their time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, some of the biggest myths I think that, or the beliefs, that misconceptions we'll say, that people have is that one, they're too young, right? Oh, I don't need an estate plan. I'm only in my 30s or 40s, which is not true, right? You can go, as cliche as it sounds, is tomorrow isn't guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one is that, they have to have a ton of wealth, right? So even if they're just in their beginning stages of investing, you still want to protect that, right? And like I said, the threshold is like $188,000, which if you own property anywhere at this point, you want to have that protected. And so it's those two. And then the third one is, I'm drawing a blank, but we'll come back. I was like, I'm sure it'll come back to me. But yeah, so it's super important to get this done. And then part of how I got into estate planning is that when I was waiting for bar results was my grandmother passed away. And my mom was appointed trustee. My grandmother had these do-it-yourself makeshift documents that she found on the internet, and she had a small estate, right? Only one house at the time. It wasn't valued at, what it is now in the Bay Area. But watching my mom navigate the loss of her mother, who's her best friend, mourning that, going through all of those emotions, and then if I wasn't there, what would she have done trying to navigate the legal language and the mess of documents that, my grandmother was well-intentioned in creating, but didn't properly do. And so at that point, I was like, there are so many people out here who need support and guidance, during these tough times, to help them figure out what's going on. And if you have a proper estate plan in place, it gives your family so much peace of mind. And I say an estate plan is not about you, right? It's a selfless act if you actually do it, because you're really setting up your family and your loved ones for not success, but so that they don't have to deal with the mess when you pass away. And then just really thinking about when I die, right? Because it is morbid. People don't want to think about that. But when I die and when I'm no longer here, do I want my family to remember me from like who I was while I was alive and the life that I lived? Or do I want them to just reflect on this mess that I've left behind because I didn't take the time to do the documents ahead of time?
That's a really good point. Yeah. And do you practice, are you able to put documents together and have this estate plan across the U.S., or are there like certain states? Can you go into the logistics of that?
Yeah, so it all is state-based. So estate planning is state-based. There is the federal estate tax, but that just says how much in taxes you would have to pay. But for the most part, estate planning is all state-based. So I'm only licensed in California, but I have a network of attorneys all over the country. So if someone needs an attorney in another, another state, I'd be more than happy to make a connection. But it is state-specific, and so it varies. So always checking in with an attorney who is barred in your state to get exact details and logistics of what needs to be done for an estate plan for you.
Okay, perfect. So tell us about your why. You mentioned a little bit about why you got, into estate planning, but what's your why overall for what you do, for maybe your personal investing, your passion of being a lawyer. Tell us what your why is. What's your driver?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I always, it changes every once in a while, but what I really think it is, so when I was in law school, what started was I worked for a nonprofit called the Pro Bono Project, and we help low income people come, with their restraining orders or going through divorce, because I originally thought I was going into family law and then realized, nope, we're not doing that. And so women would come in, a majority of them were women. They would come in and their husbands had froze the bank accounts. They were stay at home moms, gave up their careers. And I was like, these women have no control over their finances. We need, something has to give. And I ended up in law school just by chance. I never planned on going to law school. I was an anthropology major, and just, ended up there because I was like, oh, I need a job and I wasn't ready to enter the workforce. And so went to law school. Why not? But as I was going through, one was looking at my experience with those women that were in those financial, constraints, and trying to figure out how we could get women to protect their assets. And then just working in the community and just seeing how women needed to be more aware of their finances. I was like, we need to empower them, because the truth is, when women make more money, the world is a better place, right? We there are statistics where we give back to our communities, we donate more, and it just, the community as a whole grows even more as we make more money. And so why not protect our assets and put us in a position where we can make those financial decisions without not, being dependent on, not saying working together, but without being financially dependent on, someone else. And so part of it is just the empowerment of women and making sure that those assets get protected. The other part is that my family came from Mexico, and, their one little house is valued at almost $2 million now. And I just thought about, well, if my grandmother passed away and it wasn't protected, all of their blood, sweat, and tears, working in the fields and all of that would go to waste, because so much of the money would go to the state rather than to their kids and grandkids that they worked so hard for. And so it's just that combination of, finding that estate planning is actually very, very empowering for the people who do it. And it's just really beneficial to the community as a whole.
I feel like there's such a huge education gap where people aren't doing this because they don't know it's a thing, unless they've been through it, and at that point you're already burned. So at that, I feel like people don't really understand the merits of estate planning until one of their parents has died and left them with a mess. And then they'll do it for their kids. So I think, just being able to educate and tell people why this is such a time and money saver for not only them but also their children whenever they pass away, so their children don't have to deal with, like you said, being in court, dealing with probate while they're also grieving the loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
Like, it's so important, not only from an asset protection standpoint, but also for your children to, not have to burden them with this on top of the loss, And then also, to your point, Carmen, about women empowerment, I was telling Andrea before we started recording, we were kind of looking over, some things that you had written, and I just think that is so great, because the main reason, in my experience or my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but women stay in abusive relationships is because they don't have the tools to leave financially. And I think it's really important that they learn to protect their assets, learn to invest, learn to create their own financial independence, because it will keep them out of really bad situations that they feel like they can't exit.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. It is. And, they don't have the legal know-how, right? How do I, file for a divorce, or how do I ensure that I get custody or guardianship? How do I maintain guardianship for me? And so, over the kids, and then it's the financial part, maybe they're not working, or they stopped working, and just really knowing the financial resources that are out there or available. And then once they start, in getting into the workforce, how do we manage our money so we can continue taking care of ourselves and our children, so that they can remove themselves from that situation? Because so many times women go back because they can't afford to take care of themselves, and the abusive partner tends to be the financial, whether it's financial abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, right? Because there's all different types. And financial abuse and emotional abuse are huge. You may not be getting, hit or, physically
Assaulted,
abused, but there's the financial and emotional part that is actually much worse. and it leaves, I think, an even longer lasting impression on the individual.
Right. Yeah, it's just control. And we talk about a lot in our podcast about financial freedom of time and money, but there's also the financial freedom of control. When you have agency over your financial future, you have control over your life.
Yeah.
You're not having to answer to other people. You're not having to move around the country for a job and uproot your family constantly. You're not having to stay in a bad relationship. You have the freedom and the independence to make your own decisions in your life and have agency over yourself because you are financially free.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
So what's your passion project now? I mean, you must be so busy though, like just being a lawyer, but I know that you have some causes that are important to your heart. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on, we're looking to convert into a nonprofit, but I have an LLC, Empower Yourself, which essentially provides, workshops and I guess just like information and, DIY documents for women who are survivors of domestic violence, who are trying to figure out how to get back on their feet. So we like to give them like financial advice, budgeting tips, how can you make more money? Let's start a business. What can you do to monetize a skill that you have? And then, of course, the legal documentation. If something happens to you, how do you ensure that your kids are protected, and setting up guardianship forms for them? So if for some reason, right, because we do think about if the abuser gets to the woman who's already left and she's doing well and they're not seeing their kids, the anger and aggression could potentially be even worse. And if the woman passes away as a result, what happens to the kids, and making sure that they then don't have to go and live with the abuser. So making sure we set up guardianship forms so that something happens to mom, she's, the kids are taken care of. And of course that applies whether you're in a abusive relationship or not. But we like to set those documents up.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's awesome that you're giving back in that way. I know that I'm sure that everyone appreciates that for sure.
So tell us a little bit more about Qbic's Guide to Creating a Legacy. Qbic,
yeah.
How do you say it?
Qbic, okay. Yeah. So it's the queen bee in charge.
I love that.
A book I wrote probably, was this 2019? I can't even remember now. But it's available on Amazon. So Qbic's Guide to Creating a Legacy. And essentially it is I would say course, but it's really just questions on how are you living your life, really getting into your why, right? Your own personal why. So backing up even more, as I went on a personal development journey when I first found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And I was like, if I'm bringing this human into this world, am I setting a good example for her? If I die, right, because I am in estate planning and I deal with death, if I die while giving birth, what will people say about me? What will be the stories that are told? And so I really went on a deep dive into how I was living my life, relationships, and things like that. And so I became a certified life coach. So that's part of another thing that I do. It's on hiatus right now, but it is another one of my passions. And I do coaching essentially with my clients as well, just because it's digging deeper into their whys. And so the book is 7 weeks, like you break it down in 7 weeks. The first 6 weeks are looking at your why, your core values, what's really important to you, who you are, and what your non-monetary legacy would be. And then we get into the financials. What is your budget? What are your goals? What are financial? So it's the financial parts of it. And then the final week is all about estate planning and how you can protect it and how you can essentially, have your legacy continue on once you pass away. So it's on Amazon. It's a quick, lots of it's a workbook type. But it's a quick and easy read to really get you to start thinking about the life that you're living and the legacy you want to create.
So what is a life coach, and what do you do as a life coach?
Yeah. So as I like to say I'm more of a legacy coach, right? Because we go deeper into who you are, what's important, and very much living an intentional life. And I think that's super important, especially right when we start, because, I think you ask your guests all the time, right? What is your why? Like, why do you do things? And for me, it's like, at first it was my daughter, right? That's what started it. But then it was my and then it was my grandmother as to how, but now I'm like, freedom, right? And I think that's what a lot of people want, is just the freedom. And so as a life coach, you just dive deeper into the individual and you ask the right questions, and you get the individual start thinking about, oh, that's a good question. Had never actually thought about it, because so many times we end up in autopilot and we just go about the day-to-day things. We do what's expected of us. We're not really happy. We're not feeling fulfilled. And so working with a coach or just getting the right questions asked of you makes you dive deeper and live a more intentional life.
Love that. I know for us, like, we're really trying to help our listeners and viewers find financial freedom. And we offer, multifamily investing, where very busy professionals can get into passive investing so they can grow their wealth passively and not be active, like some other real estate investments are. So that's perfect. I love that.
Yeah, that's really great. And you also say that you have a checklist that people can get by signing up on your website. What is that checklist?
Yeah, so it's what we call a deficiency checklist. So it's a bunch of questions, and it will help you determine whether or not you need a will, you need a trust, or if your documents need to be updated. So that's the thing, is sometimes people think, well, I did the estate plan once, but you do want to check in and make sure it's updated every 3 to 5 years. Maybe you've gotten new investments, maybe somebody's passed away, maybe there's a new birth, someone got married. Life happens, right? And so making sure that it's updated. So our estate planning checklist essentially allows you to check in, just do a quick, a Q&A to yourself as to what type of assets you have, and whether or not, or I should say, not whether or not you need it, because everybody needs some type of estate plan, but the type of estate plan that's best suited for you.
So essentially you're helping people find their blind spots.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, you don't want to be changing lanes without checking your blind spots, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's best if you have a professional assist you in that. And it sounds like Carmen can be that girl for you, or if you're not in the state of California, she can certainly refer a colleague to you, and based on your needs. Well, is there anything else you want to add for us here?
No, I think this was amazing. I mean, I could go on forever about estate planning and, all of the different things. And the other part, right, is there's other ways to protect your assets, right? LLCs and setting things up in different ways so that your assets are protected. But the one that I focus on the most to get started is an estate plan.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. I wanted to ask you a question.
Touch on the LLCs.
Yeah, so just in terms of like investing passively, they have to, like, our investors have to sign something called a PPM document, and
private placement memorandum.
Right. And so we have questions like, oh, should I fill it out from me personally? Should it be from my trust? Should it be from my LLC? Because there's tax advantages for all the different ways to invest. Excuse me. But yeah, what is your recommendation on like how, because it's not like they're direct owners of the asset, they're co-owners, right? We invest as a group together, so they have a share that they've invested, or that they're getting from their investment.
They're also limited partners as well.
They're also limited partners. So do you have a guidance to our investors on what's the best way to go about it to make sure that it's protected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it depends on the type of protection you're looking for, right? So if we do an a trust, right? If they do it from their trust, depending on the type of trust, it may just keep it out of probate and it'll pass down to their family. If they do more of an asset protection type trust or like a dynasty trust, that limits some liability, right? But then if you have it in an LLC, you have even more limited liability in terms of, personal assets and things like that. So it really just depends on what your intention is or what you want to have happen. The other thing is I always advise people to talk to their tax professional, CPA, because there can be different tax consequences depending on how you own property. Like sometimes I have clients who have multiple investments, and they want to transfer it into an LLC, but there's a mortgage because they purchased it as an individual, right? So it can get tricky because the mortgage company doesn't necessarily want to put it into an LLC, because then how is it going to be secured? How do they know? So there's little hiccups that could occur. So making sure that you consult with someone. And so it just depends on was like, not a great direct answer, but it really just depends on, individual situations and then their purpose.
Okay.
And what they're hoping to accomplish. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like definitely whether you're at the beginning of your investing journey or you are a seasoned investor, whether you are a passive or an active investor, whether you are 25 or 65, you should definitely be talking to an attorney that can work on your estate planning. So, Carmen, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Yeah, you can find our website is yourlegacyprotectionfirm.com. Instagram, Facebook is just I am Carmen Rosas. And if you typed in to Google Carmen Rosas attorney, I'm the only one. So you should be able to find me no problem.
And I will also have her contact information linked right down below in the show notes. We'll also go ahead and link her QBIC's Guide to Creating a Legacy on Amazon. And then also we will link information about the Empower Yourself program.
Yeah, and don't forget she's a life coach too.
Yes, definitely. 2 for 1. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Carmen. You are amazing, and we are so grateful for your time.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Andrea, I learned so much.
I know, yes. JJ and I just recently did the estate planning, and it took us a long time to get there. So definitely recommend to our investors and our friends, make sure you get it done.
And no one wants to go there in their mind, right? No one wants to go to okay, we got to think about my death. Okay, right. That's never fun. And it's not even a fun thing to engage your kids on. I know whenever my parents were having that conversation with us about what would happen when they passed away in their will, we're like, oh my gosh, Mom, you're so morbid, or and it's but it's so important. And I think for me, this conversation has been a kick in the butt that even though I'm only 28, I need to be having these conversations with my husband as well.
For sure. Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
Okay, well, until next time, you guys already know how to find us. You know our email. It's just everything's goodgoodinvesting@gmail, goodgoodinvesting.com. Check out our free ebook. When you download our ebook, you will also be up to date on all sorts of events that we're going to have coming up here in the fall, which we are so excited about.
Yeah, and make sure you schedule a call with us if you want to know more about the passive investing side on multifamily. We cannot just tell you details about our deals because of SEC regulations. So definitely schedule a call with us.
Yes, they're called investor discovery calls, and you can also do that on our website. Our website's just a one-stop shop. Head there. We have links for everything where you can learn more and connect with us. So please do that. All right, until next time, Andrea, remember, don't invest good.
Invest twice as good. Bye.